Here. Well, thank you so much. This almost overwhelmingly fascinating. My head is spinning, and I'm sure everyone here has a lot of questions. And I think Karen already mentioned you have a couple you'd like to ask. Everyone here, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat or unmute yourself, and we'll let Ben share some more with us.
And before I answer questions, I just did want to thank Astrid and her team for the amazing digitization work that they've done over the years. Just about everything that you saw there was Astrid or her colleagues' work, and it's made my job so much easier, particularly since we haven't been able to get into the library very often. So thank you, Astrid.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I could watch you talk about these all day.
I had, so as far as the history of illuminated manuscripts and then moving into printed, was there a period of time, or did it continue where there's sort of a combination of the two techniques?
Yes, there's definitely an overlapping period of a century or more. And it's really interesting to see what happens, particularly after about 50 years of printing. So we have a couple of books from right around 1500 devoted to St. Catherine of Siena. And the one is a life of Catherine of Siena, entirely in manuscript, in a beautiful humanist hand. And the other are the letters of Catherine of Siena from the same year, but from a printing press. And so you kind of see these two transmission approaches and combinations of them surviving for about a century. And it's neat to see the interplay between what's being created on a press, what's being created by hand and for whom. And then for me, I find it very interesting to see the two bound together. Sometimes you'll have multiple texts, printed and manuscript, bound together in the same volume.
Great. And then
one question on that, Ben, the term is incunabula. Is that the period?
Incunabula, it's a strange term, but basically means the cradle of printing, the swaddling close of printing. So that usually refers to the first 50 or so years from Gutenberg's Bible to about the end of the year 1500. But a lot of people, and I agree with them, feel like the experimental era of early printing really continues well into the 16th century. So it's sort of an artificial designation, but a term that we can use anyway.
Do you see printing as in the text and then illumination hand done on the same page?
Absolutely. So quite frequently, particularly in that first century or so of printing, it was the practice to leave the decorative initials out, leave some of the rubrics out. For musical manuscripts, there was a lot of experiment around whether to just print the stave and have somebody write in the musical notes and that sort of thing. So there's really an interplay between the printing press and more traditional scribal work that continues on. And some beautiful decorated initials if the owner of the book could afford it. So you'd normally buy a book without a binding, without the decoration done, and then pay to have that done by other craftspeople, which I think is a practice we should bring back.
I have did you have another one, Karen? Shall I throw out a?
Well, you go ahead. I've got a few.
I have a feeling there will be a lot for you, Ben. I'm wondering two questions for you that might relate to each other. How did you find yourself in this position, and what was your sort of trajectory and until this point? And the other question is what the selection process is like for you when you're acquiring books, and what criteria you look for, how you decide, because it must be a difficult choice with so many amazing opportunities.
So I'll answer the first part very quickly. I just got extraordinarily lucky to land this dream job. I trained as a medievalist, got my PhD in music, and then began working in libraries on digital projects, spent about 10 years doing that, primarily on medieval manuscripts and early printing. And then when this job opened up, I applied for it and was very fortunate to get it. So it's I've had the job for about 1.5 years now, and the happiest job one could ever hope for, because you get to put really cool books into appreciative people's hands. It's just the best. And then in terms of acquisition, so we have traditional collecting areas within Stanford. We're particularly strong in 15th and 16th century printed books, and then 19th and 20th century fine press, with a pretty strong history of science collection as well. So we're always trying to just build on our strengths there. But we're also extremely responsive to what faculty needs are. So a lot of our acquisitions come from faculty requests, and it's a daily task to go through book dealer catalogs and auction catalogs to see what's available that might fit into our collecting categories. Now, I will say I'm one person among many who purchases for special collections, so I have my areas of focus with other curators focusing on different subject areas or different periods. So.
Thank you.
So I sort of have two questions. One would be what's the best way to find out if we sort of have a general area of interest, to find out maybe specifically what you might have?
Sure, sure.
As a member of the community.
Yeah, so I'm happy to send around a link, and Astrid might be able to forward it, but our online catalog, SearchWorks, allows you to limit to various parts of the library. So you could limit a search to special collections, and you'll get something in the neighborhood of 300,000 objects. And then you can narrow down by date or by topic. As Lorna mentioned earlier, our cataloging process and exactness has changed over time. So if you have trouble finding something, or if you're looking for something that you might be interested in, can't find it in the catalog, I and others of the curatorial staff and public services staff are more than happy to answer questions. So start at SearchWorks. If you can't find it, just get in touch with us.
Okay, great. And the other question is in person, obviously not right now, but in person, you mentioned that we could get in contact with you or some of your colleagues. I guess, how do you usually, what's the process, generally speaking?
Sure, and we try, but haven't been particularly good about making it clear how open to the public we are. So you don't have to be a member of the Stanford community. You don't have to have a library card to come see us. All you have to do is find something in that SearchWorks catalog and request to see it on site. And that will trigger a process where our public services folks will get in touch with you, let you know kind of what the procedure is to come in and see things. We've got a few rules in the reading room, but not too many. We're a very open space, and we hope that you really all will come and visit and see our materials. But basically, you come in, you put your stuff in a locker, and they will give you the material and plop you down at a seat, and you're welcome to work away at it for as long as you want.
Are there any limitations about the number of visits or anything like that?
Okay. Come back and see us anytime you want.
Oh, great.
A question came in the chat. There are a lot of artists that do, are there a lot of artists that do contemporary versions of old manuscripts? And who are they? And are there artists that copy rare manuscripts? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the three rather low quality images that I showed you of Phoebe Traquar's work is one area where you get a lot of medievalism cropping up. That is the arts and crafts book arts from, particularly from the UK in the late 19th and early 20th century. Phoebe Traquar is my first purchase, but we've got a couple of handmade books by Phoebe Rennell, who was another arts and crafts book artist from the UK, and they're spectacular. So I really am trying to promote those two artists as artists looking back at the medieval period and recreating handmade books and materials in the 20th century. But there are others. We've had some graphic novels created here at Stanford of Beowulf, for instance, so sort of a modern retelling of the story in graphic novel form. And then spread throughout our collection are manuscript-looking materials. So those are the names that are sort of cropping up right now as I'm speaking, but I'm sure I can find more for you if you're interested.
And just chiming in here too, what about facsimile? What kind of role does that play in the collection?
Sure, sure.
And maybe what they are.
Yeah, so we buy both print facsimiles, and then we work with colleagues around the world to have digital images of materials available. Our library has partnered with the Vatican, with the Parker Library in Cambridge, and with the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore to bring in high-resolution scans of many manuscripts that are discoverable now in SearchWorks as well as elsewhere. So the digital element is something that's growing quite rapidly now over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're seeing a lot more institutions bringing that material online and making it freely available. We buy print facsimiles regularly because there's nothing like having something that kind of looks and feels like the original in a student's hands. So we purchase half a dozen to a dozen manuscript facsimiles every year, really responding to faculty and student teaching or research needs. So that's something that we do as well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a related question that I'm sure many of the artists here are thinking, what about copyright for use of the images?
Yeah, so we try to make very clear when we've made images of material that's in the public domain. And I think it's any of our materials before 1924 that we've digitized are in the public domain. And if you have a question, we can make that easy through the feedback on the digitized objects. So just go ahead and ask if it's not clear. Over time, we've tried to make it more uniformly clear, but not always. And then it really depends after 1924. So if Stanford owns the material and owns the copyright to the material, we frequently make it available in a Creative Commons license. But some of the copyright materials are still held by the estates of the artists who created them, and there we're bound to whatever the agreement was when we took in and then digitized the material. So there's a varying set of permissions post-1924. But anything from our medieval and pre-1924 stuff is public domain, and please use it in any creative way you want.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you, Sandra, for Marianne Gravenstein. That's great. In the chat.
We have a few more minutes.
Oh, never mind. You were a message to me. I'm a little slow.
So if there are no more questions, I will just say one more time. I would love to host you as a group or as individuals anytime you want once COVID's over. I can get out a selection of materials to suit any interest, really. And we would love to come have you spend a day in the Barkus room looking at materials, or just come in for a quick tour. So very happy to speak with you. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you, Astrid and Karen, for organizing this. And yeah, come see us.
Thank you so much.
So much, Ben. I have to say, as one of the most generous people that I've met, Ben's love of the materials is inspiring. So do take him up on that offer, and we'll see what we might be able to organize when we're able to be there in person.
Great.
Thank you so much, everyone. So we have a brief gap between presentations, and then our last talk today is at 2:30. It's a panel of 3 BABA members, including Karen, myself, and Insia, and 2 guests. And we're going to be sharing about some book recommendations that maybe will make it onto your reading list. Thanks, everyone.
Astrid?
Yeah.
Astrid, I've got to ask a quick question.
Sure.
Outside of the COVID situation, in general, which libraries at Stanford are open to the public, to non-students?
Oh, that's a good question. Ben, do you? I know Green, I think they mostly are. The East Asia Library.
Yep, yeah. East Asia Library has a small exhibit space in the front of it. The Engineering Library also has an exhibit space in the front of it. Lane Medical Library has a wonderful rare book collection. They're open by appointment. And then Special Collections is open as well. And then, of course, our exhibit space is always open too.
That's a fantastic space at the Special Collections. Really nice.
And I think there's a small exhibit in the front of the Art and Architecture Library, Bose. I'm not sure if it's open to non-Stanford, but I assume you could probably just ask and come in and have a look.
In general, our colleagues are very happy to have visitors and to really get people in looking at the collections.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks again, Ben.
Thank
See
you
you back
very much.
here.